In the early hours of a spring morning in 1921, before the sun fully crests the horizon, a quiet hum settles over the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is a community born of necessity and vision, a 35-square-block enclave of black prosperity north of the Frisco Railroad tracks. To the outside world, it was a curiosity, a little Africa. But to its 10,000 residents, it was simply home. This is not a story of what was lost, but a quiet portrait of what was. It is a gentle walk through a single, ordinary day in a place that Booker T. Washington famously called Negro Wall Street, a name that would later evolve into the more familiar Black Wall Street. We will not dwell on the fire, but on the warmth of the hearths before it, not on the screams, but on the sounds of a community going about its day. This is a journey into the simple, daily rhythms of life, waking up, eating, working, and resting in one of America's most remarkable and self-sufficient black communities. The homes here range from modest, well-kept houses to luxurious, multi-story residences on what was known as Professor's Row. Many feature welcoming porches, where families would gather in the evenings. The streets, though unpaved, are lined with the evidence of a community investing in itself, a place where, as one resident recalled, there was a wonderful cooperation and harmony of spirit. It is a place built on the belief that black people could achieve economic progress by pooling their resources and supporting one another. The day in Greenwood begins not with a rush, but with a gentle unfolding. In the kitchens of the homes that line the residential streets, the air fills with the smell of breakfast. For many, this is a simple meal, perhaps grits and eggs, prepared before a long day of work. A significant number of Greenwood's residents worked for white employers in other parts of Tulsa, serving as maids, cooks, chauffeurs, and gardeners. Their day starts early, a quiet preparation for the journey across the tracks. Inside these homes, life has a familiar rhythm. Children are woken and dressed for school at Booker T. Washington High or Dunbar Grade School. The school system was a point of immense pride, with some claiming that black children in Greenwood received a better education than their white counterparts in Tulsa. For a family like the Goodwins, who moved from Mississippi, the promise of superior schools was a primary reason for settling here. They sought a place where their children could cultivate the one terrain that could not be burned, stolen, or erased, the terrain of the mind. Chores are completed with practiced efficiency. Floors are mopped, perhaps on a Saturday, and fresh linens are put out in the boarding houses that offer lodging to travelers and workers. For a weekly rent of around $6, a worker could find a clean room and a sense of community. The morning is a time of quiet, domestic order. It is the foundation upon which the bustling commercial life of the district is built. For the children, the morning might hold the promise of an afternoon adventure. As one survivor, Ed Lucy, remembered, a Saturday morning was for gathering pop bottles to take to the C&C grocery store, earning just enough money to go to the Dreamland Theater to watch cowboy movies all afternoon. As the morning progresses, the heart of the community begins to beat along Greenwood Avenue. This is the commercial artery, a stretch of 1, 2, and 3-story red brick buildings housing a dense concentration of black-owned businesses. Here, the principle of a self-sustaining economy was a daily reality. Because of strict segregation laws that barred black residents from patronizing most white-owned businesses, buying black was a matter of both pride and necessity. It was said that a dollar circulated within Greenwood 36 to 100 times, often staying within the community for nearly a year before being spent elsewhere. A walk down the avenue would be a feast for the senses. The smells of smothered chicken and pies waft from the 30 restaurants and cafes, like the Little Bell Cafe, famous for its 6-course meals. The sounds of the street would include the friendly chatter of neighbors, the calls of grocers from one of the 41 markets, and the rumble of Simon Berry's jitney service, which offered rides up and down the avenue for just a nickel. The shops displayed the prosperity of the district. Residents, often stylishly dressed, could browse luxury clothing and jewelry stores. Children might press their faces against the glass of the Williams Confectionery, known for its candy, ice cream, and soda fountain. A place where, it was said, more engagements were made in the churches. The storefronts were a testament to the community's entrepreneurial spirit, a city within a city, built by visionaries like O.W. Gurley, who purchased the original 40 acres in 1906 and sold it exclusively to black settlers. More than just a collection of homes and businesses, Greenwood was a community woven together by its gathering places. The churches were pillars of social and spiritual life. Vernon AME Church, founded in 1905, was built from its basement up by the congregation. Mount Zion Baptist Church, a magnificent brick structure, had held its first service just 40 days before the massacre. On a Sunday morning, these spaces would be filled with the sounds of hymns and prayer, their congregations dressed in their finest Sunday clothes. For entertainment and luxury, two buildings stood out as monuments to Greenwood's ambition. The Stratford Hotel, owned by J.B. Stratford, was a 54-suite luxury establishment, considered the largest and finest black-owned hotel in the country. Its three-story brick edifice was trimmed with stone, and inside, gorgeous chandeliers hung in the lobby and banquet room. It was more than a hotel. It was a statement, offering a pool hall, a dining hall, and a salon, providing a level of first-class amenity that was denied to black travelers elsewhere. Perhaps the most beloved institution was the Dreamland Theater, owned by John and Lula Williams. A two-story brick building with a 750-seat capacity, it was the cultural heart of the community. For just 15 cents, residents could escape the toil of their daily lives and enter a magical reverie. The theater offered not just silent films but also live musical and theatrical reviews, often featuring acts from the national black vaudeville circuit. It was a place to see heroes on screen and on stage, a place where, as the name suggests, dreams felt possible. As the sun sets, a different kind of energy settles over Greenwood. The workday ends, and the community turns to relaxation and socializing. Families who spent the day apart, some working in Greenwood, others in white homes across the city, reunite. The aroma of dinner cooking drifts from the houses. The evening is a time for strolling. Young men might stand in front of the pool halls on Greenwood Avenue, watching the elegantly dressed women walk by. The street, a center of commerce by day, transforms into a social promenade at night. The sounds of the day's business are replaced by the sounds of leisure, laughter from a tavern, the click of billiard balls, and the unmistakable sound of jazz and blues. The district was a stop on the Chitlin circuit, and venues like the Crystal Palace Ballroom hosted celebrated bands, filling the night with music. In the residential areas, life is quieter. After dinner, families might gather on their front porches, a gentle breeze offering relief from the day's heat. It is a time for storytelling, for sharing the day's news, for the simple comfort of being together in a place that felt safe and familiar. For Viola Fletcher, who was a child in 1921, these were nights of peace. My family had a beautiful home, she would later recall. We had great neighbors. I had friends to play with. I felt safe. I had everything a child could need. I had a bright future. On the evening of May 30th, 1921, this was the state of Greenwood, a community at rest, secure in the world it had built. The story of Greenwood is often told through the lens of its destruction, but its true legacy lies in the life that was lived there. It was a community defined not by a single event, but by thousands of ordinary days. It was the smell of baking pies, the sound of children playing, the pride of a newly purchased suit, the shared laughter in a movie theater. It was a testament to the power of self-reliance and the enduring strength of a people who, in the face of systemic oppression, built a world of their own. This was the Greenwood that went to sleep on the night of May 30th, 1921. A thriving, vibrant, and profoundly human place. And it is this Greenwood that deserves to be remembered. In the heart of winter, 1959, a vast and silent landscape stretches across the spine of Russia. The Ural Mountains, ancient and sleeping under a deep blanket of snow, present a world of profound stillness. The air is sharp and thin, and the low winter sun casts long, blue shadows across endless expanses of white. The only sounds are the whisper of wind through the stiff branches of Siberian pines and the distant, lonely call of a tundra bird. This is a story of a journey. It is a simple journey of 9 friends, students and engineers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, all experienced hikers who sought the quiet challenge of the winter taiga. Their goal was to reach the remote peak of Mount Otorden, a trek classified as Category 3, the most difficult for that season, a testament to their skill and ambition. This account, however, is not a story of an ending, but of the small, ordinary moments that make up an adventure. It is a chronicle of their days, drawn from the diaries and photographs they left behind. The narrative finds its gentle rhythm in the quiet interplay between the immense, indifferent cold of the Ural winter and the small, persistent acts of human warmth. The brewing of tea, the sharing of a song, the mending of a jacket. Each mundane task becomes a peaceful affirmation of life against the vast silence. We will walk with them, listen to the murmur of their conversations, and feel the heat of their fire against the biting cold. To understand their journey, one must begin not at the end, but at the very beginning, with the hum of a train carrying them away from the city and toward the great, silent wilderness. The expedition begins not with a silent step into the snow, but with the bustling energy of departure. The pages of the group's collective diary paint a scene of gentle chaos at the station. Backpacks are being stuffed with provisions, oatmeal, cans of meat, and other essentials for the long days ahead. A moment of shared, last-minute panic is recorded in a flurry of notes. Where are my felt boots? We forgot the salt. 3 kilograms. Igor, where are you? This is the familiar, relatable flurry of any group embarking on a great adventure. Once aboard the train, a world unto themselves is formed. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the track becomes the percussion for their journey. The diary notes, we sang all the songs that we know, learned new ones. Everyone goes to sleep at 3 a.m. Their voices become a low murmur against the steady pulse of the rails, a sound of camaraderie that fills the small space of their train car. This collective spirit is a hallmark of their journey, a shared identity forged in friendship and the common culture of Soviet youth, for whom such expeditions were a celebrated pursuit. Their trek was even dedicated to the 21st Congress of the Communist Party, lending it a sense of official purpose. Amidst the group's energy, there are moments of quiet introspection. Zinaida Kolmogorova, one of the 2 women in the group, confides in her diary, I feel a little sad today. But her mood soon lifts with the sound of music. Rustic is playing the mandolin, she writes, referring to Rustam Slobodin. I could listen to him for hours. This small detail, the soft strumming of a mandolin against the backdrop of the moving train, encapsulates the gentle, human core of their adventure. Even a minor, non-dramatic encounter with the police at the Serov station, where Yuri Krivonishenko is briefly reprimanded for singing too loudly, is framed not as a conflict but as a moment of youthful exuberance, a brief and formal reminder of the rules before the quiet journey continues. A day of waiting in the town of Serov becomes a portrait of the group's character. After arriving at 7 a.m., they find the station cold and unwelcoming, the officials unwilling to let them stay inside with their large packs. But soon, they find warmth and hospitality in a small schoolhouse nearby. The diary records a simple, profound act of kindness. The steward, she is also a janitor, boiled some water, and helped us with everything we needed for the preparation for the trek. In this small gesture, the group finds a moment of respite and comfort. The day is spent in quiet, methodical tasks, cleaning and distributing equipment, checking maps, and preparing for the next leg of the journey. In the afternoon, a spontaneous moment of connection occurs. During a break between school shifts, the hikers organize a meeting with the students. The room, filled with wooden desks and the faint smell of chalk, becomes crammed with so many curious children. The hikers, particularly Zina Kolmogorova, are surrounded. The children's questions pour out. What's your name? Where have you been camping? The group patiently explains their passion, showing the children everything from their flashlights to their large canvas tent. For 2 hours, the quiet schoolhouse is filled with stories and songs. This interaction reveals the group's innate ability to create community wherever they go. They are not merely passive travelers, but active, engaging participants in the lives of those they meet. When it is time for the hikers to leave for the station, the entire school comes to see them off. The diary notes that the children yelled and cried, asking Zina to stay with them. This scene, so full of pure and uncomplicated human warmth, reinforces the positive, open nature of the hikers. It portrays them not as abstract figures in a mystery, but as vibrant, kind people. This deepens the viewer's gentle, empathetic connection to them, which is essential for a soothing narrative that values human experience over dramatic events. The day ends as they board the train for Ivedell, their spirits lifted by the encounter, ready for the next stage of their passage into the wild. The journey into the wild is a deliberate, multi-stage peeling away of civilization. Each new mode of transport takes the group deeper into a more elemental state of being, stripping away the comforts and connections of the world they are leaving behind. From the train, they transfer to a crowded bus in Ivedell, and from there, they board an open-topped GAZ-63 truck that will take them to Vizhay, the last inhabited settlement on their route. This small village is the final outpost, the edge of the map. The sensory experience of this leg of the journey is sharp and clear in their writings. The air grows colder. The diary from January 26th notes a temperature of -17 ring operator C. They huddle together for warmth in the exposed back of the truck, the landscape transforming around them. The road narrows, and the dense forest, the taiga, closes in. To fend off the biting cold, they sing. Lidmila Dubanina, the other woman in the group, writes of the trip. Nobody was warm in the car, but I liked the guys and their discussions about everything. Her words capture a sense of contentment that transcends physical discomfort, a warmth generated by camaraderie alone. Their destination is a tiny logging settlement known only as District 41. Here, in this remote camp, they are treated to movies in the evening, a final, flickering taste of the world they are about to leave completely. Yuri Yudin, who would soon turn back, reflects in his diary on the experience of watching films in the taiga, noting how different it feels from a city cinema. He finds a simple performance by a local woman, Grandma, more soulful and engaging than a polished ballet on ice he had seen before. This observation highlights the journey's effect, a stripping away of artifice, leaving only what feels authentic and true. The next morning, they will leave the roads behind for good. On January 27th, the world is reduced to the sound of their breathing and a soft, rhythmic hiss of wood and wax on snow. This is the first day on skis, the true beginning of their wilderness trek. The mechanical sounds of trains and trucks are replaced by the quiet, human-powered rhythm of the march. The weather is kind to them. The diary notes a temperature of -5 ring operator C and a gentle wind at their backs, a welcome condition for their first day of exertion. It is on this day that the group of 10 becomes 9. Yuri Yudin, who had been struggling with several health ailments, feels a familiar, sharp pain in his knee and joints. He knows he cannot continue the grueling journey ahead. The parting is handled with the quiet pragmatism of experienced mountaineers. There are simple farewells, and his share of the group's supplies is carefully redistributed among the others. Then, he turns back, a lone figure retracing his steps toward civilization, while the remaining 9 continue their journey north. Zina Kolmogorova captures the moment's gentle melancholy in her diary. It's a pity, of course, that Yudin is leaving us. It is a simple, unadorned thought, reflecting the quiet acceptance of the trail's hard realities. The group quickly finds its pace, covering 8 kilometers in just 2 hours. The act of skiing becomes a form of meditation, a repetitive motion that connects them to the landscape and to each other. Their experience is evident in their synchronized effort, as they take turns breaking the trail, a shared, rhythmic pulse against the snow. This steady, hypnotic motion is deeply calming, turning what could be seen as strenuous physical effort into a soothing, repetitive pattern. As the day ends, they prepare for their first night in the tent, their movements practiced and sure in the fading light. At 5:30 in the evening, as twilight begins to cast a deep blue hue over the snow, the group stops on the banks of the Lozva River. It is time to make a home for the night. The process is a well-practiced ritual, a methodical creation of warmth and safety in the vast, cold wilderness. The tent they carry is more than just a shelter. It is a mobile world of their own making, a testament to their ingenuity and cooperation. Boris Slotsov, one of the searchers who would later find the camp, had helped construct this very tent 3 years earlier by sewing 2 smaller tents together to make it longer and larger. The setup is efficient. First, 8 pairs of skis are laid carefully on the flattened snow, creating a floor that insulates them from the frozen ground below. Upon this platform, the long canvas tent is unrolled, stretched over poles, and secured with ropes against the wind. Inside, a small, cleverly designed stove is assembled, its metallic clicks echoing briefly in the quiet air. The hikers are busy with small tasks, sewing curtains, arranging their backpacks, and preparing for the evening meal. Soon, the tent is filled with a gentle warmth and the comforting smell of dinner cooking. The atmosphere inside is light and cheerful. The diary records a moment of humor when Yuri Krivonishenko, feeling the intense heat radiating from the stove, jokingly curses and accuses the others of treason for making it so warm. The tent fills with quiet laughter. This scene of a warm, glowing shelter filled with friendship stands in stark contrast to the immense cold outside. The routine of setting up camp is an inherently calming process to observe, an act of bringing order to the wild. The final image of the glowing tent, a small beacon of human warmth against the encroaching night, becomes an emotional and sensory anchor, a powerful symbol of peace and security. Leaving the river, the group finds a trail. It is not a path they forged themselves, but an old one, worn into the forest by the indigenous Mansi people, the hunters and reindeer herders who have moved through these lands for centuries. By following this trail, the hikers position themselves not as conquerors of the wilderness, but as humble travelers moving with respect through a landscape rich with human history. They become a small part of a long story. The cold deepens, becoming a constant companion. The group's diary for January 30th meticulously records the changing temperatures: morning temperature -17 ring operator C, day -13 ring operator C, night -26 ring operator C. The wind is strong, and snow falls from the heavy clouds. Yet, the entry notes, getting used to the cold. Their bodies and minds are adapting to the harsh environment. Zita Kilmagoreva's curiosity is piqued by the signs left on the trees by the Mansi. I wonder what they write about. She muses in her diary, revealing a thoughtful engagement with the land and its history. The rhythm of their days settles into a predictable pattern. They ski through the silent forests of pine and fir, the landscape beautiful in its starkness. They stop for a simple lunch of dried meat, crackers, sugar, and garlic, eaten in good spirits before they continue their slow, steady progress north. In the evening, another camp is made, another fire is built. The diary records a small, ordinary moment of camp life. Zina and Rustam are on duty, and they accidentally burn a mitten and a quilted jacket left too close to the flames. Yurkin cursed a lot, she notes with a touch of amusement. It is these mundane, relatable moments that paint the truest picture of their journey, one of quiet routine, shared work, and easy camaraderie. On January 31st, the landscape begins to change. The dense taiga starts to thin, the trees becoming smaller and more sparse. The group is approaching the tree line, the ecological transition zone where the shelter of the forest gives way to the exposed, wind-swept slopes of the mountains. The world opens up into wide, rolling, snow-covered foothills, a vast and intimidating space. The wind becomes a dominant force. The diary of the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov, describes it with poetic precision. Wind, west, snowing. The wind is warm and piercing, like the sound of an airplane at takeoff. The walking becomes significantly harder on the wind-packed snow. In response, the group demonstrates its experience not through dramatic acts of survival, but through small, intelligent adaptations. They invent a new system to conserve energy. One person skis ahead, drops backpack, returns for break, then catches up with the group. This methodical approach, a calm and rational solution to a challenge, reinforces their competence. They are in their element, even as the environment becomes more demanding. They make their camp for the night in the relative shelter of the last trees. They display their knowledge of winter camping by building the campfire on a platform of logs, a technique to prevent it from sinking into the deep snow as it burns. Dinner is eaten inside the tent, a warm refuge from the relentless wind. Igor Dyatlov's final entry for the day captures a profound sense of contentment and achievement. It's hard to imagine such comfort on the ridge, with the piercing wind 100 kilometers from any settlement. But we are here. His words reflect a quiet pride in their self-sufficiency and the simple, profound comfort they have created for themselves at the edge of the world. On February 1st, the group begins their ascent onto the open slope of the mountain known to the local Mansi as Kholat Syakhl, or Mountain of the Dead. They had intended to cross the pass and make camp on the other side, but worsening weather conditions, including a blizzard and low visibility, caused them to lose their direction. Realizing their mistake, they decide to make camp there on the exposed slope, planning to wait for better conditions before correcting their course the next morning. Despite the harsh location, the atmosphere inside the tent is one of high spirits and normalcy. Sheltered from the wind, they decide to pass the time by creating a satirical wall newspaper, a common tradition for Soviet youth groups on such expeditions. They call it Evening Otorten. 1. The creation of this leaflet is perhaps the most powerful testament to their calm and untroubled state of mind. It is an act that requires creativity, collaboration, time, and a shared sense of humor, qualities utterly at odds with a group experiencing fear or distress. The paper is filled with in-jokes and humorous articles. One section debates whether love can exist on the trail, while another jokingly reports a new world record for stove assembly set by comrades Doroshenko and Kolmogorova. The scene inside the tent, as reconstructed from the evidence found later, is one of perfect order. Food is laid out, ready for their evening meal: biscuits, condensed milk, and sugar. Their equipment, jackets, and personal belongings are arranged neatly. Everything is in its proper place. This final act of creating the Evening Otorten serves as the ultimate expression of the journey's peaceful nature. It counters every sensational theory about the incident without ever needing to address them, offering instead a definitive portrait of 9 friends enjoying a quiet, cheerful evening together, secure in the warmth of their canvas home. In every life, there is a rhythm, a quiet cadence of ordinary moments. Waking with the sun, the simple comfort of a morning meal, the familiar path to a day's work. It is in these small, repeated acts that we find our footing, our sense of place in the world. Let us travel back to such a time, to the summer of 1945 in Japan. Here, amidst the quiet hum of a nation, lived a young engineer named Tsutomu Yamaguchi. A man of precision, a man of quiet duty, whose life was a study in the simple, steady rhythm of the everyday. This is his story, a story of quiet resilience, found not in grand acts, but in the gentle continuity of an ordinary life. The day began as any other. In Hiroshima, on the morning of August 6th, a soft, diffused light filtered through a shoji screen, illuminating the tiny particles of dust dancing in the still air. The world outside was quiet, the city just beginning to stir. For Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a 29-year-old naval engineer, this was the last day of a 3-month business trip for his employer, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. He had spent the summer working long hours, his mind focused on the intricate designs for a new oil tanker, a task demanding immense precision and control. His work was a world of blueprints and calculations, of creating order from raw materials at the massive Mitsubishi shipyards, a hub of industrial creation that had produced everything from transport ships to the formidable battleship Musashi. He woke on the woven tatami mat, the cool air a gentle presence in the room. Traditional Japanese homes of the era were spaces of elegant simplicity, characterized by wooden structures, sliding paper walls known as fusuma and shoji, and a notable absence of clutter. Life was lived closer to the floor, with meals taken while seated on cushions, fostering an atmosphere of grounded tranquility. His morning meal was simple, a reflection of wartime rationing: a small bowl of rice, perhaps mixed with barley to stretch the supply, accompanied by pickled vegetables. The sounds were soft and deliberate, the gentle click of chopsticks against a porcelain bowl, the sight of steam rising softly into the air. After his meal, he methodically prepared for his final day at the shipyard. From a leather case, he retrieved the tools of his trade: German-made compasses, polished metal dividers, ruling pens, and an engineering scale. These were instruments of order, their cold, smooth surfaces familiar in his hands. The satisfying click of the case closing signaled the start of his routine. He was a man whose professional life was a testament to the power of logic and predictable physics, a stark contrast to the uncertainty of the world outside the drafting room. He began his walk through the streets of Hiroshima. The morning was still and pleasant. An air raid siren had sounded around 7 a.m., a familiar daily occurrence as American weather planes flew high overhead, but an all clear was soon given, and the city's residents returned to their routines. The sounds of the city waking were muted and distant: the clatter of a streetcar, the murmur of voices, the rhythmic sweep of a broom on a stone path. Mr. Yamaguchi's thoughts were of finishing his work and beginning the journey home to Nagasaki, to his wife, Hisako, and their infant son, Katsutashi. The flow of the morning was steady, pulling him toward the day's end and the promise of home. He met his colleagues, Akira Iwanaga and Kuniyoshi Sato, and together they made their way toward the train station, their business in Hiroshima complete. But the rhythm of the day was interrupted by a small, human moment of forgetfulness. Mr. Yamaguchi stopped, patting the pockets of his jacket. He had forgotten his hanko, his personal identification stamp, an item essential for signing off on documents and a ubiquitous part of daily life in business in Japan. With a quiet word to his colleagues, he turned back, walking alone toward the Mitsubishi docks to retrieve the small, crucial item. His path was now solitary, the ambient sounds of the city his only company. It was a simple errand, a minor inconvenience that would alter the course of his life. As he walked, he heard the low, distant drone of a single aircraft. Looking up, he saw an American B-29 bomber. He watched as it dropped a small object attached to 2 parachutes. Then, the world became silent. A great, blinding flash filled the sky. In his own words, it was like the lightning of a huge magnesium flare. There was no sound, only an overwhelming, brilliant whiteness. His naval air raid training took over instantly. He dove into a nearby irrigation ditch, covering his eyes and plugging his ears. A moment later, a sensation of immense pressure, not of violence but of pure force, lifted him from the ground, spun him in the air, and set him down in a soft potato patch less than 2 miles from where the event had originated. He believed he fainted for a time. When he opened his eyes, everything was dark, and the world was utterly silent. The blast had ruptured his eardrums. The dust and ash were so thick they had blotted out the morning sun. He described the moment with a quiet, cinematic detachment. It was like the start of a film at the cinema before the picture has begun, when the blank frames are just flashing up without any sound. The ordinary film of his day had been cut, replaced by silent, flickering frames of an experience for which there were no words. His first instinct, upon gathering himself, was not to comprehend the incomprehensible, but to return to his routine, find his colleagues, and get on the train home. Somehow, amidst the profound disruption, the machinery of daily life had not entirely ceased. The train station, though damaged, was still operating. Mr. Yamaguchi, his face and arms now covered in bandages to protect his burns, found his 2 colleagues, who had also survived. Together, they joined the quiet, stunned crowds and boarded an overnight train bound for Nagasaki. The journey itself became a sanctuary, a space between 2 worlds. The interior of the train car was functional, made of wood, its surfaces worn smooth by countless journeys. During the war, Japan's extensive rail network had been severely damaged, but essential lines continued to run, a testament to the nation's reliance on this artery of connection. The train was crowded, yet the passengers were largely silent, each lost in their own thoughts. For Mr. Yamaguchi, the journey was a meditation. The rhythmic, hypnotic clack-clack of the wheels on the tracks was a sound of order, of steady, forward momentum. It was a direct contrast to the silent, chaotic unmaking of the world he had just witnessed. The gentle, predictable sway of the car was a comfort. Through the window, the landscape of Japan scrolled by, verdant rice paddies, the dark, stoic forms of mountains, the tiled roofs of small villages. A world that still looked as it should. The 180-mile journey was a thread of normalcy, pulling him away from the surreal darkness of Hiroshima and back toward the life he understood, back to the familiar embrace of his home and family in Nagasaki. Arriving in Nagasaki on August 8th was a return to the familiar, a deep breath of relief. He made his way to his home, a traditional wooden house with the familiar textures of tatami mats and sliding paper screens. Here was the sanctuary he had longed for. His wife, Hisako, and their infant son, Katsutashi, were safe. The reunion was quiet and tender. Hisako, herself a future survivor, gently tended to his bandages, her touch a soothing balm on his burned skin. He held his son, the soft weight a grounding, tangible reminder of the life he was determined to preserve. In the days that followed, He would suffer from the effects of radiation sickness, high fevers and incessant vomiting. But in this first moment of return, there was only the profound peace of being home. On the morning of August 9th, despite his grievous injuries, Mr. Yamaguchi prepared to go to work. This was not an act of defiance born of anger, but a quiet, determined effort to restore the rhythm of his life. By returning to his routine, he was reaffirming that the structure of their world still held, that he could still fulfill his duties as an engineer, a husband, and a father. It was an act of profound love, an attempt to rebuild the walls of their sanctuary not with wood and paper, but with the steady, dependable cadence of his own actions. His wife helped him dress, her movements careful and deliberate around his fresh bandages, a silent partner in this shared effort to reclaim the ordinary. The Mitsubishi office in Nagasaki was another world of order and logic. The air smelled of paper and ink. Wooden desks were arranged in neat rows, some holding blueprints weighted down at the corners. The sounds were those of quiet industry, the rustle of papers, the distant ring of a telephone, the low murmur of professional conversation. At around 11 a.m., Mr. Yamaguchi was in a meeting with his supervisor. He was calmly recounting the events in Hiroshima, explaining how, as far as he could tell, a single bomb had destroyed the entire city. The concept was beyond comprehension. His supervisor, operating within the known laws of physics and warfare, was incredulous, telling the young engineer that he must be crazy. A single bomb could not do such a thing. As Mr. Yamaguchi tried to explain the inexplicable, the universe provided a terrifying validation. The office was suddenly filled with the same silent, iridescent white light he had witnessed just 3 days prior. "I thought the mushroom cloud had followed me from Hiroshima," he would later recall. His experience gave him a crucial few seconds of instinct. He threw himself to the ground. His colleagues, their minds primed by the crazy story they had just heard, immediately followed his lead. The shockwave arrived, and the office windows shattered, the sound not a violent crash but a distant, crystalline tinkling, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. His bandages were blown from his body, but he was otherwise unhurt, protected by the building's sturdy stairwell. For the second time, he had been just under 2 miles from ground zero, and for the second time, he had survived. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Yamaguchi's body bore the burden of his double exposure to radiation. His hair fell out, his wounds turned gangrenous, and he was racked with fever and vomiting. He later recalled hearing the Emperor's surrender broadcast on August 15th with a sense of detachment. "I was neither sorry nor glad. I was seriously ill. I thought that I was about to cross to the other side." But he did not cross to the other side. He survived. His life, which had been so profoundly disrupted, slowly found its rhythm again. After the war, he worked for a time as a translator for the Allied occupation forces before eventually returning to his career as an engineer at Mitsubishi, once again designing oil tankers. He and his wife Hisako, who also suffered from the effects of radiation, raised their 3 children. He led a long and relatively healthy life, a quiet existence dedicated to his family and his work. For decades, he rarely spoke of his experiences. Like many hibakusha or bomb-affected people, he carried the weight of his memory in silence. But as he grew older, and after losing his son to cancer, he began to feel that his unique survival was not a coincidence, but a destiny. In his 80s, he began to write, publishing a memoir titled Ikasareteru Inochi, A Life Well Lived, and a book of poetry. The man of engineering, who had long imposed order on the physical world through design, now began to impose a different kind of order on the chaos of his memory through the strict, 5-line structure of tanka poetry. This form became a vessel, a way to contain and express the profound trauma within a safe, predictable framework. His poems and his public speeches were not filled with anger, but with a deep, philosophical sorrow and a plea for peace. "The reason that I hate the atomic bomb," he explained, "is because of what it does to the dignity of human beings." At the age of 90, he traveled to the United Nations to share his story, a quiet man carrying a message of immense weight. His life became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. He passed away in 2010 at the age of 93 from stomach cancer. His survival was a paradox, a story of seemingly impossible luck and profound misfortune. Yet in the long, quiet years that followed, he found a purpose. Having experienced atomic bombings twice and survived, he said, "It is my destiny to talk about it."
History is often presented to us as a grand tapestry of kings and queens, of epic battles and groundbreaking inventions. It's a story of logic, of cause and effect, of progress. But sometimes, if you pull at a loose thread on that tapestry, you find a story that makes no sense at all. A story that is so bizarre, so utterly alien to our modern understanding of the world, that it feels more like a fever dream than a historical event. This is one of those stories. It's a story about a city that, for a few summer months, lost its collective mind. It's a story about dancing. Not the joyful, celebratory kind of dancing. But a desperate, agonizing, and ultimately fatal dance. Some might call it a boring story. There are no great armies, no political assassinations. It's just people dancing. But it's a story that, once you hear it, might just keep you up at night. A sleepless story, wondering how something so strange could have ever happened. This is the story of the dancing plague of 1518. Our story begins not in a palace or on a battlefield, but on a narrow, cobblestone street in the city of Strasbourg. The year is 1518. It is mid-July, and the summer sun beats down, trapping the heat between the timber-framed houses. It's a city on edge. The people have endured a harsh winter, failed harvests, and the ever-present specter of diseases like leprosy and the dreaded syphilis, which they called the French pox. Famine and poverty are not abstract concepts, they are the daily reality for many. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, livestock, and a quiet desperation. And it is into this tense, simmering world that a woman steps out of her home. Her name, history tells us, is Frau Trophia. We don't know much about her. She wasn't noble, she wasn't famous. She was an ordinary woman, living an ordinary life. But on this particular day, she did something extraordinary. She walked into the middle of the street, and she began to dance. There was no music. No festival. No occasion for celebration. Her movements were not graceful or joyful. They were jerky, convulsive. Her arms flailed, her legs kicked. Her face was blank, her eyes unfocused, as if she were seeing something no one else could. She danced with a silent, frantic energy. Her neighbors would have noticed, of course. A woman, alone, dancing without music in the oppressive summer heat. It was a strange sight. Perhaps they thought she was celebrating some private good news. Or maybe, they whispered, she had a dispute with her husband and was making a public spectacle to shame him. They watched, they pointed, they murmured. But Frau Trophia didn't stop. The sun reached its peak, casting short, sharp shadows on the cobblestones. She kept dancing. Her husband, we are told, pleaded with her to stop, to come inside. She either didn't hear him or couldn't obey. The day wore on. Dust kicked up by her ceaseless feet coated the hem of her simple dress. Sweat drenched her hair and clothes. But still, she danced. As dusk fell and the lamps were lit, casting a flickering, uncertain glow on the scene, Frau Trophia was still dancing. Her body, by now, should have been screaming for rest. Her muscles should have seized. But an unseen force compelled her onward. She danced through the night, alone, jerking silhouette in the deserted street, until she collapsed from sheer, agonizing exhaustion. She slept for a few short hours, a fitful, twitching sleep. And then, as the morning sun rose again, she got up. And she began to dance once more. This was not a moment of madness. It was the beginning of a nightmare. For several days, Frau Trophia's bizarre, relentless dance was a solitary spectacle. She was the talk of the neighborhood, a local curiosity, a woman seemingly possessed. But then, the unthinkable happened. The fever, as it would come to be known, began to spread. It didn't spread like a cough or a sneeze. It spread by sight. Within a week, another person had joined her. Then 3 more. Then a dozen. Men, women, and even some children, one by one, began to stumble into the streets and start dancing. They mirrored Frau Trofia's frantic, joyless movements. There was no shared rhythm, no coordinated steps. It was a cacophony of individual convulsions, a public display of private torment. They danced until their feet were raw and bloody, their clothes tattered and soaked with sweat. They would fall, exhausted, only to rise again and continue their horrifying marathon. Imagine the scene. The narrow streets of Strasbourg, a city of about 20,000 people, slowly filling with these silent dancers. The normal sounds of the city, the clatter of cart wheels, the cry of vendors, the ringing of church bells, were now punctuated by the soft, rhythmic thud of bare feet on stone and the ragged, gasping breaths of the afflicted. The city authorities were baffled. These were not rebels or heretics staging a protest. They seemed to be acting against their own will. Eyewitness accounts from the time, recorded in city chronicles, sermons, and notes, described the dancers' faces as being filled with anguish. Some cried out for help, some screamed in pain, some wept as they danced, begging for it to stop. But their bodies would not obey. By the end of the first week, over 30 people were consumed by this dancing mania. They were a constant, moving presence in the city. You couldn't escape them. Turn a corner, and you'd see a small group, limbs flailing. Go to the market, and a man would be spinning uncontrollably near the stalls. The city was no longer just on edge, it was terrified. What was this affliction? Was it a curse from God? A spell cast by a witch? A new, unknown disease? The one thing everyone agreed on was that something had to be done. The city's leaders, the guild masters and magistrates, convened in the great cathedral, its stone walls a stark contrast to the chaos outside. They needed a plan. The leaders of Strasbourg, men of the 16th century, consulted the wisdom of their time. They consulted physicians who still relied on the ancient Greek theory of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The diagnosis they settled on was surprising. They concluded that the dancers were suffering from hot blood. It was a natural disease, they declared, caused by an overheating of the blood in the brain. And the cure? The cure was not rest. The cure was more dancing. Their logic, though utterly bizarre to us, had a certain internal consistency. They believed the dancers needed to literally dance the fever out. They had to keep moving, day and night, until the hot blood had cooled and the disease had run its course. It was a prescription for exhaustion, born of desperation and flawed medical theory. So, the city council took official action. They didn't try to restrain the dancers. Instead, they leaned into the madness. They cleared out public spaces to give the afflicted more room. They famously designated the horse market and the grain market as official dancing halls. And then, they took the most surreal step of all. They hired professional musicians. Drummers, fiddlers, and pipers were brought in to provide a constant, driving beat. Their job was to keep the dancers moving, to encourage the very behavior that was destroying them. They even went so far as to build a large wooden stage in the middle of the market square, a public platform for the plague. Healthy dancers were paid to join in, to provide encouragement and keep the energy high. Imagine the sheer, hellish absurdity of that scene. Hundreds of people, their bodies racked with involuntary spasms, their minds screaming for release, being forced to dance on a purpose-built stage. Below them, drummers beat out a relentless rhythm. The city, in a desperate attempt to heal, had created a public spectacle of torture. Of course, the plan backfired. Spectacularly. The sight of the stage, the sound of the music, the presence of the crowds who gathered to watch this grotesque festival, it didn't cure anyone. It made things worse. The dancing plague, which had been confined to a few dozen people, now exploded. The loud, public, officially sanctioned nature of the cure seemed to act as a powerful trigger. Onlookers, watching the spectacle for hours on end, would suddenly feel their own limbs begin to twitch. The fever was contagious not by germ, but by suggestion. The number of dancers swelled from dozens to over 400. The city's cure had become a catalyst for a full-blown epidemic. The music did not work. The stage did not work. The city's well-intentioned cure had turned a crisis into a catastrophe. The dancers did not stop. They only died. The daily death toll began to climb. Men and women, in the prime of their lives, were dropping dead in the streets. They died from heart attacks, from strokes, from pure, unrelenting exhaustion. Their bodies simply gave out. The Chronicle of Imlan, a primary source from the era, states that at the peak of the plague, as many as 15 people were dying each day. The wooden stage became a platform of death. The markets became open-air morgues. The city leaders, watching their plan unravel into a tragedy, finally admitted their mistake. The hot blood theory was abandoned. If this wasn't a natural disease, then it must be something else. It must be supernatural. Their thinking shifted from medicine to metaphysics. This was not a job for physicians, it was a job for priests. They declared that the dancers were suffering from a divine curse, a punishment from God. Or, more specifically, a curse from a particular saint, Saint Vitus. Saint Vitus was a Christian martyr from the 4th century. In medieval Europe, he became associated with neurological disorders. People suffering from epilepsy or other convulsive conditions, a category they called Saint Vitus's dance, would pray to him for a cure. But a saint who could cure could also curse. The leaders of Strasbourg concluded that the dancers had somehow angered Saint Vitus, and this plague was his divine retribution. The new cure was penance. The music was stopped. The stage was dismantled. The professional dancers were dismissed. Public gambling and prostitution were banned to appease the heavens. And the afflicted dancers, those who could still walk, were gathered up. They were put into wagons and carried out of the city, away from the scene of their torment. Their destination was a shrine, carved into the cool, dark caves of a mountain near the town of Saverne. It was a shrine dedicated to the very saint they believed had cursed them, Saint Vitus. The journey itself must have been a vision from hell. Wagons filled with twitching, groaning people, their bodies still trying to dance even as they were bound for travel. When they arrived, they were led into the dark, damp caves. There, priests performed masses and religious rituals. The dancers were given small crosses and red shoes. They were led around an altar bearing a likeness of the saint, prayed over, and sprinkled with holy water. They were left there, in the quiet darkness of the mountain shrine, far from the chaotic streets of Strasbourg. The city held its breath, praying that this new, spiritual cure would finally work where the secular one had failed so miserably. The plague eventually subsided. We'll get to that. But the question that has echoed for 500 years is, why? What actually happened in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518? The people at the time settled on the curse of Saint Vitus, a supernatural explanation for a terrifying event. But modern historians and scientists have looked back at the evidence, searching for a more rational cause. One of the most persistent and compelling theories points not to a vengeful saint, but to a microscopic culprit. A poisonous fungus called Claviceps purpurea. Or, as it's more commonly known, ergot. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other similar grains. In a wet, cool spring followed by a hot, damp summer, precisely the weather conditions reported in 1518, this fungus can thrive, infecting the rye that was a staple food for the poor of Strasbourg. When ground into flour and baked into bread, the ergot gets eaten. And the consequences are horrific. The poisoning is called ergotism. It has two primary forms. One is gangrenous ergotism, which causes intense burning pain in the limbs, as if they are on fire, a condition once known as St. Anthony's fire. It restricts blood flow, leading to peeling skin, withered limbs, and eventually, gangrene and death. The other form is convulsive ergotism. And its symptoms are chillingly familiar. It attacks the central nervous system, causing violent muscle spasms, twitching, writhing, and powerful, delirium-inducing hallucinations. Sufferers experience mania, psychosis, and agonizing headaches. In essence, it can make you feel like your body is moving against your will, trapped in a waking nightmare. Sound familiar? A poison that causes uncontrollable convulsions, mania, and hallucination seems like a perfect fit for the dancing plague. The theory suggests that the poor of Strasbourg, already weakened by malnutrition, were systematically poisoned by their daily bread. The dancing was not dancing at all, it was the violent, convulsive spasms of mass poisoning. This theory is neat. It's scientific. It provides a biological explanation for a bizarre historical event. However, it's not a perfect fit. Most historians who have studied the plague in depth point out some serious flaws. First, while ergotism causes convulsions, the descriptions from 1518 are consistently of dancing. The movements, while frantic, seemed coordinated enough to be labeled as dancing, not just random, flailing seizures. Second, ergotism is a brutal, deadly poison. It typically kills its victims much faster than the weeks or months the Strasbourg dancers endured. It's hard to imagine someone surviving for a month while dancing non-stop on a dose of ergot potent enough to cause such extreme symptoms. And perhaps most damningly, there is no mention in any of the historical records of the other, more common symptoms of ergotism, especially the gangrenous form. The chronicles talk of exhaustion and heart failure, but not of the burning, St. Anthony's fire, or blackened, rotting limbs. So, while the devil's fungus is a tempting explanation, many believe the real cause lies not in the stomach, but in the mind. If it wasn't a poison, and it wasn't a curse, then what's left? The most widely accepted explanation today is perhaps the most unsettling of all. It suggests that the poison wasn't in the bread, but in the culture. The sickness wasn't in the blood, but in the collective psyche of an entire city. This is the theory of mass psychogenic illness, or what was once called mass hysteria. To understand it, we have to look deeper into the world of 1518. We have to understand the profound stress that weighed on the people of Strasbourg. This was not a happy time. As we mentioned, famine was rampant. Starvation was a real and present danger. A series of terrible harvests had left people destitute and desperate. Disease was everywhere. Syphilis, smallpox, and leprosy haunted the city, with no effective cures. The fear of a painful, disfiguring death was constant. On top of this material suffering, there was a deep spiritual anxiety. This was the age of the Reformation. Just a year earlier, in 1517, Martin Luther had nailed his 95 Theses to a church door, sending shockwaves through Christendom. The old certainties of faith were crumbling. People were terrified of divine punishment, of damnation, of demonic possession. Their worldview was one where the supernatural was not a fantasy, but a real and active force in the world. Curses were real. Saints could be angered. The devil could walk the earth. Now, into this crucible of fear, starvation, and disease, introduce a trigger. A strange, inexplicable event. A woman, Frau Trophia, begins dancing in the street. Her dance becomes a public symbol of the city's unspoken anxieties. Mass psychogenic illness occurs in societies under extreme stress. It manifests as physical symptoms, but without a physical cause. It is, in a way, the body acting out the mind's terror. It spreads through social contagion. One person sees the symptoms in another, and their own stressed mind, hypersuggestible and desperate for an outlet, begins to manifest the same symptoms. The belief systems of the time played a crucial role. The people of Strasbourg believed fervently in the legend of Saint Vitus. They believed it was possible to be cursed with a dancing plague. So when they saw what looked like a dancing plague, their minds filled in the gaps. They were culturally primed to respond in this specific way. It was a shared, trance-like state, fueled by fear and sustained by belief. This explains why the authorities' cure of building a stage and hiring musicians made things worse. It validated the reality of the dance. It made it a bigger, more powerful spectacle, drawing more suggestible people into its psychological vortex. And it explains why the second cure, the pilgrimage to the shrine of Saint Vitus, may have actually worked. By taking the dancers away from the stressful environment of the city, by performing calming religious rituals, and by invoking the very power they believed had caused the plague, the authorities were, in essence, performing a mass countersuggestion. They were telling the dancers' subconscious minds that the curse was now lifted. In the cool, quiet darkness of the cave, away from the eyes of the crowd and the beat of the drum, the trance could finally be broken. The fever of the mind could finally cool. By late August or early September, the dancing began to slow. The trip to the shrine of Saint Vitus seems to have been the turning point. As the last of the afflicted were either recovering in the mountain caves or succumbing to their ordeal, a strange quiet fell over Strasbourg. The chronicles don't record a specific day when it ended. There was no grand announcement. The fever simply broke. The stages were gone, the musicians silent. The few surviving dancers slowly, painstakingly, stopped dancing. The nightmare was over. What was left was a city scarred and bewildered. Hundreds were dead. Families were broken. The summer of 1518 would be burned into the city's memory as a time of inexplicable horror. The name of Frau Troffea went down in history, not as a person, but as the patient zero of a psychological epidemic. The event wasn't entirely unique. History records other, smaller outbreaks of dancing mania throughout medieval Europe, from the 7th to the 17th century. But none were as large, as well documented, or as deadly as the one in Strasbourg. It stands as the most extreme example of this bizarre phenomenon. And so, the story ends as it began, with a question. We can layer on our modern theories of ergotism and mass psychogenic illness, and they provide a framework for understanding. But they cannot fully dispel the profound strangeness of the event. They can't let us feel the stifling summer heat, the gnawing hunger, the deep, existential terror that gripped an entire city and compelled them to dance themselves to death. It's a boring story, in a way. No heroes, no villains. Just people. People pushed to the absolute limit of their endurance, whose minds and bodies finally broke in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. It's a story that reminds us that beneath the surface of our orderly, rational world, there are strange currents of belief, fear, and human fragility. It's a story that crawls under your skin, because it's not really about dancing. It's about the terrifying power of the human mind.